Hello, my name is Jim Hermann. I've represented Social Security and veterans disability claimants for the past 25 years. I can be reached at 800-900-4440 or my email address, HermanAdvantage@gmail.com. That's one R, two N's, HERMANN, advantage@gmail.com. I want to provide insight into a couple of things. Number one being Social Security's definition of a medically determinable impairment. A medically determinable impairment is something that's applicable to any medical problem or that you might have that we're trying to find a path for approval for you. A medically determinable impairment goes far beyond you and me just saying, that you have a back that's really painful, that it's sore, that causes you a lot of problems, keeps you awake at night. Matter of fact, Social Security says that symptoms, quote, are the claimant's your own description of his or her physical or mental impairments. Symptoms cannot establish, this is what's important, cannot establish the existence of a medically determinable impairment. In other words, what you're saying about your problems, they don't get on the scorecard. That's really the bottom line of what they're saying there. They're saying in their regulations that a medically determinable impairment is something that is related to objective medical evidence. Objective means signs, laboratory findings, or both. Now, what do they mean by signs? Part of this, I have to kind of read part of it to you. Signs are one or more anatomical, physiological, or psychological abnormalities that are observable apart from the claimant's statements, your description of your symptoms. Signs must be shown to be medically I'll get it out in a moment, demonstrable phenomenon that indicate specific psychological abnormalities of behavior, mood, thought, memory, orientation, development, or perception. Psychiatric signs must be shown by observable facts that can be medically described and evaluated. Fairly high-powered language, fairly complicated. The bottom line really is that in order to be approved for disability, you've got to have medical treatment, and your doctor must make diagnoses based on the description I just read in a manner that is acceptable within the practice of medicine is really what that means in everyday language. And of course, I think I won't take your time to define laboratory findings. I think that's self-evident. When you have your blood work done, it's there, and it can be read by your doctor or any technician or nurse practitioner. And a medically determinable impairment must be considered what the Social Security Administration calls severe. It's not a real huge threshold to meet that severe definition. For a medically determinable impairment to be severe, it must be something that more than minimally interferes with your ability to function. And again, as always, the key word is function. It's always the key word. It's always the common thread in everything, particularly Social Security disability or disability in any realm. If you need more information on any of the topics that I talk about, and if you have any sort of internet or web access, you can simply Google the term medically determinable impairment for Social Security disability, and you'll be able to identify what I just outlined. I want to use obesity as the second point of our discussion today, the Social Security Administration has published what they call SSR 19-2P. And again, if you have any access to the internet, you can also Google that, SSR 19-2P. But what it really means is that they're going to consider a person's obesity in making decisions about Social Security disability. More specifically, if you have a BMI, body mass index, which is a function of your height and your weight, of 30 or higher, or a waist size greater than 35 inches for women and greater than 40 inches for men, that will generally establish a medically determinable impairment of obesity. Under this new Social Security ruling, effective May 20th, 2019, so it's been out there for a while, but it has a number of advantages to us in terms of trying to find a path for your improvement for disability. And they've indicated in the documentation that it says also although the ruling 19-2P states that functional limitations caused by the medically determinable impairment of obesity alone or in combination with another impairment may medically equal a listing. That's very important. Medically equal a listing. So it may not need to, they use the terminology, meet the listing, but it may, in the opinion of your doctor and the adjudicators at Social Security who are making the decisions, it may medically equal, it's very important, equal a listing. And a listing, if you've looked at any of my earlier videos, you know that meeting a listing or being medically equal to that listing is basically one of the three ways in which to reach a finding of being disabled. In other words, being approved for Social Security disability. Indicating further, the Social Security ruling indicates that obesity may contribute to the limitation of the person's range of motion, of the skeletal spine, and extremities. In other words, extremities being could be your hands, could be your feet, could be some portion of your arms or legs, and also the spine. Obviously, obesity can have a negative impact on a person's back and spine, which can lead to functional limitations. Social Security always thinks in terms of exertional limitations, sit, stand, walk, things of that sort, lift and carry. But stand and walk are incredibly important to your path to being approved for Social Security disability. If you have a significant limitation with regard to how long you can stand, or if you have a significant functional limitation as to how far you can walk, you have gone a great distance in finding that path for approval for disability for you. Looking at other elements of the ruling, and they're talking about, of course, the ability to sustain function over time. Again, that word function, it's always there. It's always the common thread. And you may have noticed that I've said that in earlier videos, YouTubes. That's the key to being approved for disability is function, function, function. How is your function limited, and to what degree, and to what extent? But the other part of the obesity ruling is that explaining that, quote, fatigue may affect your physical and mental ability to sustain work activity. Again, very, very important in terms of finding that path for approval. And they go on to say, especially in cases involving obesity and sleep apnea. So if you have a combination of both the obesity and then you're having problems with getting the kind of rest you need, sleep apnea, but you have to actually have a diagnosis of sleep apnea, just like everything else in the disability world. And the ruling goes on to say that the combined effects of obesity with another impairment may be greater than the effects of each of the impairments considered separately or alone. And they're using in the ruling the example of obesity and arthritis. In other words, your obesity could be a major factor in making your arthritis worse than it otherwise would have been. And so one of the other things that they have pointed out that they look for, or that you and I want to look for in finding that path to approval for you, is what they call adipose, ADIPOSE. I don't pretend to be a physician or a medical person, but I can read these things. But adipose is simply fatty tissue in the hands and fingers. Most unskilled jobs that Social Security Administration talk about that a person can do require good use of both hands. And so again, so your medically determinable impairment of obesity, and then if your medical folks are able to find adipose in addition to that, it again goes a long way toward finding a path of approval for you. I'm reading to make sure I'm not in my notes, to make sure I'm not missing anything else. But just the final note, the final element on this, there's an indication in the ruling that the person's weight, measured waist size, or body mass index must show a consistent pattern of obesity. In other words, some people might have a medical condition, they may have a medication that's causing a significant side effect of weight gain. Once they stop taking that medication, perhaps they're able to, that weight's able to come off. So, you know, if the folks at the Social Security Administration, the decision makers, are looking for those patterns. It has to be a consistent pattern of obesity. So let me know if you have questions related to this. You can reach me at 800-900-4440. I hope you find this helpful. If you do, please subscribe to my YouTube videos and give it a thumbs up. List any questions you may have as well, and we'll do everything we can to be helpful and responsive to you, and wish you well and wish you the best in your path to finding approval for disability benefits for yourself. So thank you for viewing. You take good care.